Everybody outside. All right, everybody. Can you hear me out the back? Wave your hand if you can hear me back there. All right, thank you. All right, we're gonna start. I know that there is a lot of folks still in line for food. I'm sorry to do this to you, but the way we do this luncheon, at least not to be married to the way we've always done it, but we do have lightning presentations, so that's 10 minutes, 10 slides or less. So we're gonna power through this and try to make your lunch be really valuable and try to get some takeaways from this this hour that we have together. So just to set set the stage, my name is Kenji Haratunian. I've been in this industry, the greater outdoor industry, for 33 years now, starting at Adventure 16, which sadly has closed its doors after 57 years now, down in Los Angeles, where I live and work. I have been a guide and outfitter. I've been the show director of the Outdoor Retailer Show. I do events like Outdoor Media Summit and Outdoor Press Camp and other events in the industry, including Climb Smart and Joshua Tree. And so I've been helping to put this together for, I think it's about 10 years now. And so we try to do this every OR show so that we gather the voices and the interest of inclusion in the industry, and we can come together and network a bit, and also hear some stories about kind of the best practices of what's been happening in and around the industry. So that's how we've done it. We've had some different formats over the years, and I just thought this picture was pretty interesting because this is from maybe 5 years ago, and there's 24 people in this picture. And hands up if you're in this room and you're in that picture. See? And so if you're questioning of whether this movement is a movement or what's going on, or we've been moving. So thanks for coming, and thanks for making the time. Let's see. I'm going to check my notes real quick. Hey, so one thing we haven't done before is to see who's here. Like, where are we coming from? What sectors of the industry? What is the industry? And I thought it'd be fun to just take a minute to say, how many people are here? Like, look, if you're wearing your badge, how many people are here from the nonprofit world? And how many people are here who are retailers? Cool. And how many people are here who are brands? And now I'm checking my notes. How many people are here who are media? And anything other? Great. All right, thanks for that. That was actually really instructive. And I think it's especially exciting for me to see retailers and brands in the mix. That wasn't much the case early on, and I think we've been able to attract more activity there, and also showcase that during this event. So thank you all for coming. Of course, there are sponsors who helped us put this on. When I say us, there's kind of a small group of founders here, people like Brad and James and Devaki, who's not here. But those are the people that thought this was a good idea, and we should start to kind of beat the drum when we were back in Salt Lake. And but also, people who are helping this happen at this scale are far beyond, my personal budget. So I really want to thank some of you who have been here from the very early beginning of this. Camber Outdoors is here, and they've been with us from the beginning. As well, REI, who's stepped up to sponsor this event, and ++ because they provided some last-minute AV support where I was struggling a bit. So thank you to REI. And VF Corp, who's also been with us for some time now. So thanks to Reggie, and we'll hear from Joe and some of their team later on. And OutdoorIndustryJobs.com. So one of the very first, 14 years ago, Laurel started OutdoorIndustryJobs.com, a female-owned company in this industry that helps. It's a self-serve job board. So if there's job interest or you just want to see what's happening in the different sectors, she does it also for bike and in other segments of the market. I believe hunt and fish maybe, but take a look at OutdoorIndustryJobs.com, a very important resource. And then lastly, a newer organization called Respect Outside. So we're going to hear from Jim and Gina later on this lunchtime. So that's the sponsored lineup this time. Thank you so much. And also some of the past folks that have really helped build this up into a much bigger event and the biggest gathering at the trade show around inclusion for sure. So let's see. Real quick, I thought it would be important before we start the lightning presentations. I feel like a lot of questions are coming at me about, well, who are you? What do you do? Like, who do you work for? What's your company? And I came in here to the Denver Athletic Club. So I just thought, let me just say that I, having been the show director of Outdoor Retailer, having had that part of my career arc, give me that opportunity, has exposed me to a very large network of folks. And so I've been focused since I left OR in 2015 to produce and help strategize events that bring important communities together in the outdoor industry. So, media gatherings, climbers down in Joshua Tree, groups at the trade show around different issues that are arising, Zika some years ago. So I try to focus on really specific groups, but I've always recognized as the show director of OR, the only way that I win as a brand leader is if the whole industry grows. It doesn't help me if Marmot takes market share from Sierra Designs, or if Life Straw does better and First Need does does less well. It only helps if the whole thing grows. And so how are we going to do that? Well, part of it is asking the question, how can we be more relevant to a broader community? And that's what this is about. So just what I do, I'm passionate about inclusion. I have a long history, including work with Outward Bound. I'm married to a woman who worked in affirmative action at UCLA for 15 years. And in my time with Nielsen, who owned the trade show during my years as the director, they had a very robust inclusion program that was, I feel like, cutting edge. And in fact, if you look and see who are the diverse companies or the most diverse recognized companies in America, Nielsen is in the top 20 now. So there's some good background there, good experience outside of the industry to bring in, I feel. But I think that hearing from the broader group inside the industry about what's happening is helpful in the sense of spurring ideas and tactical things that can be done at small companies, small organization, all the way up to the largest that we have. So that's who I am in a nutshell. Let's see, I think we can move on. And I'd like to start the lightning presentations with Emily Newman. Emily is the new executive director of Camber Outdoors. She comes to us from outside the industry, so I think she might have a really interesting story for us and something to inspire us to look around and see what's out there that we can emulate and bring into the outdoor industry. So, Emily, you ready?
Thank you so much, Kenji. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for being so welcoming. My name is Emily Newman. The pronouns I use are she, her, hers, and I'm the new executive director for Camber Outdoors. Kenji asked me to come and introduce myself. I'm really pleased to say that I've had a chance to get to meet many of you in the last few days, and just excited to be here. I do come from outside of the industry, so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I have spent my whole career focused on workplace and workplace inclusion, and how do you build workplaces and how do you support removal of barriers to workplaces and workplace inclusion. I began my career with an organization in Southern California that got a fair bit of national recognition because we achieved a 93% success rate with helping persistently homeless individuals to build the skills of getting and keeping their own jobs. And then we built a very large social enterprise, a $6.5 million social enterprise to support apprenticeships in that space to continue that pipeline forward. I then spent a number of years as a consultant. I helped around the I'm going to date myself, but when the Staples Center was launched, there was a a concerted effort from the investors in the Staples Center not to re-experience for the community what had happened with Dodger Stadium many years ago, which effectively decimated an entire community in Los Angeles. So I worked together with the philanthropic arm of one of the investors to be very intentional around inclusion in the sort of economic boost that comes in many different forms, whether that's in forms tied to entrepreneurship, whether that's in form tied to pipeline into specific jobs at the Staples Center and so forth. But really thinking about how do you support communities in that workplace engagement and remove those barriers. Later on, I did a little bit of work with the former White House with the former president's My Brother's Keeper program, helping to export that program to being an evergreen program with the Obama Foundation. And I spent some time working inside of technology companies and helped to develop a technology to eliminate bias in the hiring process. So always around workplace, I'm passionate about and aspirational about what workplaces can look like. And it's actually what drew me into this position. I think that, as Kenji mentioned, as I'm not of the outdoors, I've been so glad and grateful to be welcomed to the outdoors. I do have I would say, a late coming passion for the outdoors that really stemmed from, I am a parent of a child who struggled with specific motor coordination challenges as a kid, and so we went outside, and I'm super proud to say that for my child, being outside was very healing, and I'm also very passionate about access in that regard because I recognize that kind of access, hiking, scrambling, looking at mountains, using my son when he was 2 ran headfirst into our kitchen island every day, and we knew there was a challenge. So we've moved to Colorado, and he is now a slackliner, and all because of the outdoors. So I'm personally passionate about the sort of healing power of the environment and making sure that that access is available for all parents, particularly. So Camber, just a little bit, and you mentioned sort of we've been with you for some time. Camber really needed to take a look this last year. What does that really mean to be with people and to be shoulder to shoulder in specifically in workplace, but among a group of peers and leaders who are doing that work. And so when I joined Camber, we looked very deeply at how our programs, with the help of some wonderful board members and my extraordinary team who are in the back, really digging in on what are those best practices in workplaces, because this industry is not the only industry that is struggling to, in a sort of fully employed and competitive marketplace, make sure that that instead of moving to technology, we're really opening that space for inclusion in access to jobs, in retention to jobs, and so forth. So we will be focused on a few things this year, and I'm really proud and thankful. I know I saw Teresa out there for co-hosting the collaborative roundtable with me the other day. We extended invitations, and we will continue to extend invitations to leaders in the nonprofit space to just make sure that we are connecting, but also thinking about how do we move to action. And for me, that was really the place that Camber needed to go. How do we support our corporate partners in moving to action? So there are a lot of, for example, statements out there, but really what are you going to do to move forward in achieving this work, and how do we bring everyone to the table in that effort to achieve this work? So we begin with inclusion in the workplace, and talking about inclusion because everyone has a role in creating an inclusive workplace. And you will see us activated here around that role with our Camber story bus, it's the big yellow bus outside. If you haven't had a chance to stop by either our story bus, we have a few stories I know have already been told in here, or our story booths that are inside. You can just walk up and sort of Superman style, maybe Superwoman style, super anyone style. You can hop in there and tell your story, and there are prompts, so you don't have to be an experienced journalist and know exactly how to sort of move through. We've got good questions in there. We'll also be bringing some excellent experience and talent from outside of the sector to talk about workplace and what's happening from a global perspective in workplaces. So I hope you'll all join us at our breakfast tomorrow. And then our programs this year are centered around specific workplace learning themes, so that we are laser focused on helping our corporate partners to have those tools and resources to move forward in building their workplaces of choice. I really believe that the flywheel, we are a strong force at 9, but 9 team members at Camber, but that flywheel does not move until corporations move. And we see that already with excellence with groups like VF who are really leading forward in this work. And we want to encourage all of the corporations in this space to be doing that, to be leading forward, to be leaning on those promising practices to build those workplaces. So you can find us tomorrow at breakfast. You can also find out more on our website. We'll be hosting and bringing in and engaging folks in this room, folks from outside of the industry to lead our webinars, so that we've got some excellent education for our corporate partners, and really getting together and being thoughtful and intentional around how we stand shoulder to shoulder in this work, because we are but one organization, and we are working on one piece of this. We look forward to working with all of you.
And just to bring attention to a few things that I missed during housekeeping, we have our first non-human attendee of the luncheon. So, greetings. Bilski the dog. Hi, Bilski. Also, I wanted to recognize a sponsor, I forgot, Outdoor Media Summit, which Yoon Kim, who helped us get this space, is the CEO of. So Yoon's here over in the corner, also one of the early founders of this event. So Yoon is part of the circle of creativity here. So Outdoor Media Summit is an event that happens in Estes Park here in Colorado this April, and it kind of moves around each year and gathers the leading media minds of the outdoor industry. Also wanted to recognize Eric Steele. Eric is a longtime friend, someone that I've worked with since my days of Outdoor Retailer. He is the one who's set up the audio piece of this here. We're recording it through using his system for posterity's sake. And if you see other versions of the Inclusivity Luncheon from past, it's probably Eric's work. So his outfit is called Steele Media. He's based here in Colorado as well. All right, so up next is a new organization, and I'm excited to offer this up. This isn't really something we've addressed here with the luncheon ever in the past 10 years, yet it's an integral part of the DEI and inclusivity equation. And so I thought it was great timing and really important. My friend Jim Miller, who I've known for a long time from the paddle sports world, kind of a legendary guy there, working with different brands. And launching his own company was someone that I've followed for a while, and then he reached out recently with their new organization called Respect Outside. And so we're going to have them come up and tell us what Respect Outside's about. His partner, Gina McLeod, is who's going to speak, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself and why this work is important, what it is, and why it's important to DEI Outdoors. So, Gina, come on up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kenji, for hosting us today, and we are really honored to be included in this long-standing Inclusivity Luncheon. It's great to see everybody here. Kenji, your commitment and forward thinking continue to benefit all of us in the outdoor industry. Thank you. It's really heartfelt. How many of you in this room have experienced, witnessed, or heard of sexual harassment in your workplace? Yeah, unfortunately, that's what we see everywhere we go. It's endemic. I'm Gina McClard, and I'm the co-founder of Respect Outside. I'm a cisgender, bisexual attorney who's been working for the past 25 years to improve the criminal and civil justice systems for survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment. The company, Respect Outside, helps provide sexual assault, sexual harassment prevention consulting and trainings exclusively for businesses in the outdoor space. My partner, Jim Miller, who I'm going to make stand up so y'all see him, and I have enjoyed long careers dedicated to both the outdoor industry and human rights, respectively. Ever since Me Too, we've been hearing more and more people come forward to tell their stories. Collectively, we applaud their bravery. We also recognize that some companies are beginning to adapt their workplaces to respond and to be more open to sexual harassment discrimination in a good way. That may have come out the wrong way. There's a lot of good things that have come out with Me Too and the repercussions, but there's also been some backlash, as we could expect. So let's start with the positive things about Me Too. In 2019, over 300 legislators from 40 states and the District of Columbia have come forward and dedicated their support for strengthening protections against sexual harassment in 20 states by 2020. This is commonly known as the 20 by 2020 Harassment Pledge. In 2019 alone, state legislators introduced over 200 bills with exactly those same goals. Most victims of sexual harassment need time to muster the courage and navigate their way to report sexual harassment. Time is essential in these cases, and several states have given victims more time. Connecticut, Maryland, New York, and Oregon extended their statute of limitations, or the time in which you can file a workplace claim of discrimination and, of course, sexual harassment. And I'm proud to say that the superstar here is my home state of Oregon, which has extended that time period to 5 years. Oregon. There's also a lot of work being done and laws being passed about mandatory anti-sexual harassment training. A whopping 9 states have now required companies to provide anti-harassment training. Big states like New York and California, and smaller states like Delaware and Vermont. But here, Connecticut's the rock star, because Connecticut now requires that all companies that have at least 3 employees to require yearly sexual harassment training. And I want to make a note here that what I'm seeing in some of the larger, more liberal-leaning states is that a lot of this legislation is coming out of Me Too and is directed directly towards sexual harassment. But we're seeing big moving states like New York now amending those laws they passed in 2018 to 2019, where they're also broadening it to include all discrimination. Non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, have been the bane of existence for a sexual harassment survivor. Company-imposed NDAs have silenced victims of sexual harassment and empowered employers to hide their ongoing systemic harassment. But 13 states, from Tennessee to Washington, now limit or altogether prohibit the use of NDAs on a condition of employment, so when you're first starting work, or when there's a settlement case for discrimination or sexual harassment. So this is big, real progress. When businesses formally address sexual misconduct, we make powerful strides in creating civility in the workplace. And this is exactly what we need, civility. We become open to a larger discussion about how to cohesively create action in the workplace. And echoing what Emily said, it's great to have a slogan and to say good things, but it must be followed by action. But there's a downside to Me Too, like there's a downside to almost anything. So there's been a backlash, and there is a storm brewing at the Supreme Court that I wanted to tell you with. So bear with me, lawyer. I'm full of legalese and technical things. So privileged men are pushing back and creating their own rules to stifle the conversation and turn back the clock on equity. This is known as the Pence effect, because Mike Pence famously refuses to dine with any woman other than his wife. We're seeing men retreat and use the fear of making a misstep to strip opportunities for women to be included, mentored, and ultimately to rise to positions of power within their organizations. But the Pence effect extends beyond sex discrimination. People in the workforce are afraid of making mistakes. How many of you have heard, things have gotten so politically correct, I don't even know what to say anymore. Maybe I'll just shut up. No one wants to be called out for making an offensive comment to a colleague who's a person of color, or for using the wrong pronouns with their non-binary coworker. But this fear of interacting, this fear of engaging, has really resulted in this minimizing of contact, the isolation of the other, and creating fewer opportunities for people to advance and to take their rightful leadership opportunities. Now, one solution for this reactionary workplace effect is to require organizations to conduct implicit bias training. Another one would be for organizations to formally sponsor mentorship and sponsorships within their organizations. And these are the kind of things that Respect Outside helps organizations implement. So if this information is of interest to you, then you definitely want to keep your eye on the Supreme Court. We are awaiting a decision in the case that at the Supreme Court, which has challenged whether sexual orientation and gender identity are protected under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is the federal law used by the EEOC to fight workplace discrimination. In this decision, the Supreme Court will decide what it means to discriminate on the basis of sex. Almost half of the states in the United States recognize sexual orientation and gender identity as sex, thus providing protections under state law. But the rest of the states don't provide protection under state law. Usually, LGBTQ folks in these hostile states would rely on federal law to seek protection. But the Supreme Court case may deny protections under federal law in these cases. Given the conservative makeup of the court, many fear a very narrow definition of sex will leave the LGBTQ community unprotected by both state and federal law. Now, this is obviously a complicated issue, but regardless of what happens at the Supreme Court, equity work will continue. It has to. It's the best and right thing to do. But it also makes business sense. A recent McKinsey study showed that companies who had culturally and ethnically diverse executive committees and executive teams were 33% more likely to have better than average profits. So it pays to be diverse. As I've mentioned, Respect Outside helps companies create a comprehensive policy and procedures around sexual harassment. And part of this work is to help companies understand that not all victims are the same. companies need to create their sexual harassment policies to offer a myriad of ways for folks to respond, report, and cope with workplace harassment. No two victims are the same. It's essential that organizations recognize that people of color, men, and LGBTQ community employees may need a different approach in responding and reporting workplace harassment. In our industry, creating a more diverse and inclusive workforce is going to take significant effort, as many of us in this room know. We come to this industry with shared values for outdoor spaces, sustainability, and the climate crisis. Collectively, we've done a great job in outdoor stewardship, teaching outdoor ethics, respect for the environment, to leave no trace. But now it's time for us to bring all the aspects of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion under this big and burgeoning sustainability tent. That's where it belongs, that's how it affects workplaces in the outdoor industry, and that's where everyone should be together in this work industry. Many of y'all have been doing this work for a long time. But we all know it will take a coalition, and Respect Outside is really happy to be on this journey with you. Jim and I will be at the front table back there after this if y'all have questions for us or the work we do, and we have some information there as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Gina. That was really, really inspiring. And thank you for bringing up the climate issue as well. And so, yeah, I think I really appreciate that fresh look at diversity and inclusion through the lens of climate and of sustainability. That's a real takeaway to me. We're moving on to feature one of our founders here at the Inclusivity Luncheon, James Edward Mills. Many of you know him. Many of you love him. Many of you might not. But that means you don't really know him. But so James wrote a book a few years ago called The Adventure Gap, 2017? 2014. Really? Damn it, I feel old again. So his book was really one of the first actual treatises out from the industry perspective out to the world about a particular event, a climb on McKinley, that he'll tell you a little bit about. But really the question to James that he's going to attempt to answer here is like, well, where have we come since then? That was 5-6 years ago. Maybe we can get an update from James on the Adventure Gap. And I know we're running a little bit behind, so I wanted to add just a couple things. There is more food coming. I know it emptied out pretty quick. And let's see, also I missed giving the land acknowledgement. So we're here on Arapaho land, also Cherokee, I believe. And so I just wanted to make sure to get the Ute as well. All right, thank you for that. And so wanted to make sure we covered that. And then I'll speak a little bit more after James on another thing happening tomorrow. So take it away.
Yeah. That's lucky. Well, everybody, thank you so much for having me today. And I got to tell you, Teresa Baker gave me a hard time last night. She says that I've been doing this work longer than she's been alive. That's not true.
It's not nice either. It's not nice.
But the reality is that not unlike Kenji, I've been attending Outdoor Retailer as an event for a very long time. I've actually started my career in 1989, but I've been attending this show since 1992. And when I began my career, much of what we're experiencing now was kind of just in its very much fledgling stages. And the book that I created, The Adventure Gap, Changing the Face of the Outdoors, is basically the upshot of the last 25 years of my career, which, like many of you, started, frankly, when I was a kid. I've been engaged and involved in the outdoor as a participant from a very, very early age. And after an experience in college, being able to exercise my personal interest and passion for the outdoors, I really had many opportunities to spend time in nature. I'm here with my very best friend, John Mayer. The year we graduated from college in 1988, hiking to the Grand Canyon for the first time. Directly after college, working for the Campus Outing Club, and this is not
being happy.
yeah. Actually, working for the Campus Outing Club at the University of California, Berkeley, where I got a degree in anthropology and spent the very first year of my career in the industry working as a climbing instructor in Yosemite. Directly after that, actually, why don't I have you advance the slides for me? Being able to spend time with friends in the outdoors, and in this photograph, being able to do an ascent of Mount Whitney at the highest peak in the lower 48. But also being able to go on to have a career in the outdoor industry. And this is really where my story here begins. This photograph was taken my very first season as the first African-American sales representative for a little company you might have heard of called the North Face. And this was our sales force at the time, and I was one of 12 full-time professional independent sales representatives for the North Face. And as it happens, I was actually hired the same year that they hired the first woman to be an independent sales rep. And this is in 1992. And from there, I actually had the experience being able to travel around the country, but specifically in the Midwest Territory as an independent sales rep. And much of my job was to be the face of the North Face in 6 Midwestern states that I lovingly refer to as Louisiana Purchase. Because it basically represents Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, North and South Dakota, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And me and my dog Jenga traveled that territory 35,000 miles a year, and had a fabulous time telling the story of outdoor recreation. And I was quite literally the face of this brand at the time. But one of the things that I realized was that there seemed to be a divide between who spends time in nature and who doesn't. Because many of the things that you probably recognize in all these photographs is that I was typically, if not exclusively, the only person of color. And something really kind of hit me that our industry did not reflect the racial and cultural diversity of our country. And attending an event like Outdoor Retailer from 25 years ago, I was quite literally one of maybe 10 to 15 people of color in the entire building back when we were in Reno, also at the Salt Palace. And when we started talking about this, I started doing some research and came up with some interesting statistics. For example, currently the African American population represents 13% of the population as a whole, but they actually only represent less than 2% of national park visitors. Now, if you take a look demographically at where we are from the year 2000 to 2014, the nation's black population grew 35% faster than the population as a whole. And by the year 2060, we're estimated to go from 4.5 million to 7.5 million, making up 17.9% of the total population. So what happens if, as these numbers are increasing, our participation in the national parks and other wild and scenic places doesn't increase with it? And ultimately, I think that creates a problem, not just in terms of the industry of outdoor recreation, but the long-term preservation of our wild and scenic places. Because if we take a look at the demographic reality, it's estimated by the year 2045, fully half of the U.S. population will be non-white. And if we don't keep pace with these statistics, ultimately we will have a majority of the population with limited affinity for the outdoors. Because when we take a look at what that ultimately means, when minorities basically become the majority, what happens when we fail to engage a new emerging population of youth that will be the engine of the future? So it's at that point, I think that it's very important, as we're moving upon all of us in this room, to directly engage a new generation of young people who can become part of the outdoor industry. Because we have a long history of the protection and preservation of our wild and scenic places. Some of you might recognize this photograph from my book. This is Charles Madison Crenshaw. And in 1964, he became the first African American to summit the highest peak in North America, a mountain then called Mount McKinley, now called Denali. And what's especially interesting about Crenshaw is he actually did that 7 days after the signing of the Civil Rights Amendment. And oddly enough, if you take a look at Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, he quite literally outlines outdoor recreation as part of his vision to ascend to mountains. The last paragraph reads, let freedom ring from every mountainside, from the curvaceous slopes of California to the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. But at the time, there were places in this country where Charles Crenshaw couldn't live, he couldn't vote, he couldn't exercise his rights as an American citizen. But as mountains do, they don't discriminate. So I think we have an excellent opportunity to be able to share the important work of racial and cultural integration and also diversity and inclusion through the work that we do in the outdoors. In 2013, when we put together the first all-African-American team ascent of Denali, we actually put together a coalition of athletes that are reflective of an emerging population so that we now have solid visual representation of what mountaineers can look like. So hopefully, as we engage this new generation of young people, they will see people who look more like themselves. So much so that in 2018, Outdoor Afro successfully put the first team of all African-American climbers on the summit of Kilimanjaro. That included one of our athletes from Expedition Holly, the youngest female member of our team, Rosemary Saul, actually did something that no one had ever done before. And that was because of the support and encouragement that she received from people in this room and from the work that we've successfully done to make our industry more diverse, equitable, inclusive. So much so that when you go to Outdoor Retailer today, it looks a little bit more like this. And as we talk about what it means to make our industry more inclusive, we can ultimately, hopefully, introduce more people into the sports that we love. And I want to make sure that when we get into the outside, we can see ourselves as part of it. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, James. Very inspiring and a great story told quickly. So thanks for that. There's a lot of work that went into that. That was really like super clip notes. But thanks for sharing that with us. And more to come from Mr. James Mills. Just real quick, tomorrow there is we talked a little bit about justice and about climate. Like these are things that are rising in our industry, and they're connecting with our sort of industry meets conservation platform that a lot of us have known about for a long time, and that has attracted us to work in this industry to begin with. We're not just an industry looking for favors in policy and support. We're an industry looking to create access for all and to create a social justice platform that allows all people to get into the spaces, to get into the wild, to achieve a healthy recreation outcome. Tomorrow there's a climate march. It's at 1:30, starting at the Bear, I think. Is that right? Anyone know about that?
Starts at the Bear.
Yeah. So 1:30. I just wanted to help promote that. Carolyn Gleich, my friend, and the lovely Katie Bouet has been leading that, and so for those that can make it, heads up. All right, we're going to move on, and we're going to hear from REI, one of the most persistent companies focused on inclusion in the industry, if not by far the most down the path. So, LaDon, you're here? Yes.
Hi.
Take it away, LaDon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Kenji, for inviting us. And thank you to all the speakers. Ooh, that light is bright. I just have to start by saying it's a true honor and privilege to be in a room with so many people who are doing and have been doing this kind of work for so long. So thank you for including us, and my name is LaDon Yalzadeh, and I'm the manager for a particular project that REI is supporting that is a part of a much larger body of work. The project itself is called Race and Place, and I'll get a little bit more into it. I wanted to pick up on something that you said, James, in terms of, thank you so much for just breaking down the demographics and how this country, by 2045, will be majority non-white. It's so important to include the voices and the representations of these communities in the conversation. I myself, I'm Iranian American. I was an immigrant here. I immigrated here when I was 16, and you can imagine the representations of an Iranian in current day America. So I have a personal connection to this work. What we discovered was that majority of diverse communities ultimately don't feel safe or welcome in the outdoors for many, many reasons, many of which you are already familiar with, so we won't get too deeply into that. However, what we realized was that the outdoor industry players, if you will, including REI, some of the large industry movers and shakers, were not necessarily for a very long time helping the situation. And part of it is because, for example, REI was started by a white couple, and they pretty much recruited their friends, and so it just was the cultural norms of them and their friends, and many of the outdoor industry was basically sort of following the same suit. However, when we started to really look at how we could change the norms, what we realized was that there was both internal work that we had to do at REI, and this is long before my arrival at REI, as well as really the work that we were doing customer-facing. And I just wanted to share this slide because this is really our North Star here with our For All agenda, which is the DEI work that REI is committed to. And it starts with the belief that REI, we believe that a life outdoors is a life well lived. And that is true for all. And so what we discovered was that we had to very systematically and strategically address all of the different work streams that we had at REI in order to really be able to then speak to our commitment to the DEI work when it came to our customers. So my brilliant colleague here, Nicole Browning, can tell you all about this. This is her creation, and she is totally from top down in the weeds with it. So we can, hit Nicole up later about this slide. However, this is sort of like a manifestation, just a little bit of a taste and a manifestation of what REI's then customer-facing projects have been. We support a plethora of nonprofit partners, some of whom are here, and I'll do a shout out in just a moment, by supporting them both financially and also in kind, but also we internally have launched major campaigns, for example, Force of Nature, which many of you are familiar from a few years back, where all of REI's efforts was put in that direction of really highlighting women in the outdoors, to supporting LGBTQ events, and we have a large storytelling channel called Co-op Journal, and through that channel we tell a lot of stories, and many of those stories have also been covering the DEI. So, Race and Place. This project in earnest started in 2017 in two phases. And it kind of worked in reverse, actually. What we wanted to do was to really address in two ways the idea of communities of color and how they were reclaiming and redefining the outdoors. What we realized was that REI didn't necessarily have the expertise. So we worked with The Atlantic and basically asked some of our greatest partners, which, Kenji, if you can forward that slide, that'd be great, which is on the next slide. Thank you. These are our partners that we basically brought together as a think tank, and we all began to ask the question of what was the barrier to entry for communities of color and diverse communities. So these are some of the faces you'll recognize. I just saw our dear friend and current advisory board member, Jose Gonzalez here. Jose, are you in the room?
Yeah, Jose.
Yeah. And I also ran into Len Nessa for a little bit earlier, and so, oh, great. And Perry is here. Where you at, Perry? Oh, great. So we brought people from a very, very sort of diverse connection to the outdoors, right? Some of them were academics, some of them were government officials, people who just love the outdoors, people who were founders of affinity groups in the outdoors. And we encouraged them to ask the question of what was the barrier to entry for folks. And they identified some of those and also then put together a very, very pragmatic, wonderful set of action steps, if you will. And if you just Google REI and The Atlantic, it was published in 2018. It's still online, and you will see the full result of that project. So, if we can advance, thank you. So that basically led us to what ultimately is the most powerful medium we have, which is the medium of storytelling. My background is in film. I'm a producer, but I'm also a socially engaged artist for many, many years. So I've worked with many diverse communities to bring together their stories in different forms. And part of what we wanted to do was to bring together a diverse group of folks at very specific locations through long discussions and guidance by our advisory board. Kenji, if you don't mind. Thank you. So this advisory board, some of whom had carried on from the Atlantic project, we basically took their lead in a year-long process of really talking about what regions to focus on, what were some of the topics at hand, and really following their guidance. And some of them are remaining as our partners as the project comes into fruition, hopefully later in the fall. So, and again, some of the, folks that were working on it before. And what we decided was that we were going to have what we're calling trail chats. So there will be people, again, from a very diverse background in terms of their professions, their race, ethnicity, gender, all of that. But that they would be stakeholders within each one of these locations who could talk about their connection to the land and really discuss the location in a very complex and nuanced way. One of the things that we are discovering, again, with the guidance of our advisory board, is that there is a lot of complexity to these stories, that many of us have connections to the land that sometimes overlap and sometimes actually can appear to be in conflict with one another. But that what's important is for us to really show that we can all be in conversation with one another, even if we are sometimes seeing things not completely eye to eye. And this is part of what's so exciting about this project, is that bridging, or kind of dissolving this thing that's happening in this country in terms of us versus them, and this very sort of, divided country that we're living in. Anyway, so we worked with our, luminaries and our advisory council. We have 4 places. The participants will be invited to come to literally what is called a trail chat. So we will have outside locations where we take a stroll down the trail or go to some key locations and have a conversation, informal conversation that's about this location and all the different topics that might come up in terms of the significance of it. No, that's perfect. Thank you. The 4 locations that the advisory board deemed as good places to start, and again, this is a starting point, is the Thule Lake National Monument in California, the site of the largest Japanese American internment concentration camp in the country, but also a native land to the Modoc tribe of Oklahoma, who were displaced in the 1800s when they lost the war there, to current local farmers. And it's an economically depressed region in the very, very northern border of California, and a very significant one because it's actually the largest bird migration path in the United States. So many, many stakeholders and many, many interesting topics to discuss. The second location is the border region of El Paso and Juarez, and this region was selected because we wanted to showcase how one community on two sides of the border had a very symbiotic and fluid community, and there is a 10K race that happens there, sponsored by the El Paso Community Foundation, and we're very excited to showcase that. The third region was the African Meeting House in Boston, and what's really unique is that that's the oldest, as many of you know, Black church north of the Mason-Dixon line, and it was an absolute hub for folks who went through the Freedom Trail and finally made it to the north, and then of course there was no support or there was no spaces for them to really be free and among one another. So, and what's unique about this is that it's actually an urban trail that we're covering, and that's one of the things that REI is also discovering, is that we kind of need to redefine what we mean by the outdoors, that not everybody is a mountain climber, and not everybody is a an adventure sports person and can travel 100 miles from their home to go get outside. That maybe the nearby park might be their version of the outdoors, or an urban trail around the neighborhood. And then the last one is Bears Ears National Monument, which for many of us, it's very significant what's happened in the last few years. But what's also significant, and again with the brilliant guidance of our board and Len, is to really kind of focus on the coalitions that have developed there between not just the sovereign nations, the tribal nations there, but also between the nations and the climbing community, and how it's expanded the understanding and the respect of both communities that have typically been at odds with each other. Oh, well, I guess that's the end. So just very quickly, thank you so much for coming. I think that probably the slide that I skipped is that, hoping, it's really, this is a multidisciplinary project that we are, inviting artists and storytellers and essayists and journalists. And so hopefully it will be multidimensional, and it's, here are some examples, and one of the inspirations that Nicole and I continue to go back to is the 1619 project, because of its breadth and how contemporary and cohesive and beautifully put together it was. So that's sort of, and here are some other examples of it. So stay tuned, and if you have questions, I'm definitely available after. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, LaDon. All right, moving right along. Thanks for sticking around. I know we're running a little bit late. We are turning the mic over to, last but not least, to Joe Bryant II. Joe works in diversity and inclusion with VF Corporation. And so I'm going to hand it right over to Joe. And go on with it.
No, I don't get an applause. That's awesome. I was just about to sit up here and say, this is always a room where I feel the most at home, and y'all just gonna not clap. First thing I'm really focused on love right now, with everything going on. First things first, thank you to Kenji for putting this together. Second, thank you to all the other speakers who shared some really exciting things. Third things third, today's my dad's birthday, so can I get a really quick happy birthday? Happy birthday. And the reason that is important, he's a Southern Baptist preacher, and my promise to him is that I will not be up here as long as he's on the pulpit on Sundays. I'll be concise. I really just wanted to spend my time talking about really two words as I was sitting there in the audience, and that's reflection and perseverance. I think back to a year ago with where VF was in our journey, a lot of transition. In the process of relocating several individuals and their families to the Colorado Rockies, in the process of relocating the world headquarters, in the process of relocating several brands. And I reflect back to where we were at that time, and to now be in our temporary space in Greenwood Village, to be transitioning down to downtown here later this year. It really gets me excited about really the perseverance of our associates and the perseverance of our teams. But one thing that has remained throughout that time of transition is our commitment to inclusion and diversity. And really for us, the reason I'm excited is to talk to you all a little bit about what inclusion means to us. For us, we really want to make sure that whether you're a consumer, whether you're a candidate in the talent pipeline, whether you're an associate in our stores, in our supply chain environments, or in our corporate environments, that you can feel valued, supported, or championed. And make sure that you have an opportunity to develop your career and own your career in an equitable ecosystem that creates that opportunity for you. So I wanted to share 4 things that we're doing in Q4, which for us is January, February, and March, to really give you all a little insight into some of the work that we've been doing. The first is our Jonestown Distribution Center talent strategy. We understood as we've really thought about making sure that our conversation around inclusion is more than gender and more than people of color. We looked at people with disabilities in that community and the lack of opportunities that they have had historically as it relates to work, whereas their desire to work has always been high. So again, 18 months ago, our leader, Reggie Miller, along with the supply chain executive, traveled to a Walgreens distribution center in South Carolina to understand what they have been doing over the past 15 years in creating an environment and a process for people with disabilities to come in and begin working into their factories. So for us, we started to do that. And we launched our talent strategy again, Perseverance, 18 months ago. Our East Coast Distribution Center came online last January. And I'm excited to say that next month in February, we'll be launching our Inclusions Talent Strategy, where we will be welcoming in a cohort of 4 to 6 people with disabilities. We redesigned the distribution center to create a test lab for those individuals to spend 8 weeks practicing and learning in a controlled environment what their jobs will actually be when they get out on the floor. So again, that will be in Jonestown, Pennsylvania, and we're really excited about adding that component of people with disabilities to our global disability strategy. The second thing I want to talk about is our Employee Resource Group Leadership Summit. I see some people in here who will be participating in that, and I'm really excited for that. We have over 40 Employee Resource Group leaders coming from all around the world to the Denver area to learn about what ERGs will need to be for the company moving forward. But the reason I get excited about this is because of those 3 words. I'm not sure if you can see it: education, experience, and exposure. We want to make sure that the leaders who are putting in this work to champion inclusion and diversity within our brands and our campus locations get this opportunity and access with our senior leaders. So we're starting with a welcome reception with our CEO to really talk about the importance of ERGs to the company. We'll start the afternoon of day 2 really understanding the new governance and really the structure and really support that our team will provide them so they can continue to champion inclusion and diversity around our 4 C's: career, commerce, community, and culture. The reason I'm excited about the Leadership Summit is because we've really embedded our executive sponsors into that process. Each of our executive sponsors will be talking about a different topic that most people don't get an opportunity to talk about in a structured environment. Things like strategy, right? What's the where to play, how to win, and how can you embed this into your ERG strategy for the following fiscal year? Things like influence, the importance of listening and understanding your stakeholders so that you can accomplish a team goal. Things like business acumen, understanding the importance of managing a P&L and how understanding that financial component can accelerate your career. And then the thing that I get most excited about is our executive speed networking. We'll have members of our executive leadership team and vice presidents sit down with our leaders for about 15 minutes each in a group setting and rotate and talk about things like, what are you most passionate about? What's been your biggest career accomplishment thus far? And that's really goes back to the word of access, right, to me. So we're really excited about that. And then we'll spend the 3rd day really talking about your fiscal 21 action plans and how you can leverage this, the things that you've learned to accelerate that. We'll also have a keynote speaker and do a best practices panel as well. February starts on Saturday, so we're really excited for Black History Month and, of course, International Women's Day. Say that again? International Women's Day and Women's History Month will be right around the corner. And we're excited because we have multiple activations that are led by our brands throughout the Americas. 3 of our movement territories, we have 3. They're Outside Matters, Worthy Works, and Free to Be. And so we've been excited to see how we've been able to embed those territories into the themes of our work. So here, and I love what James said about the adventure gap, because here in Denver, in collaboration with our multicultural employee resource group, ACE Diversity, we're actually going to be hosting a panel entitled Celebrating Being Black in the Outdoors, where we're inviting Dr. Raywyn Grant, who's a conservation scientist and wildlife ecologist. I practiced that at home and I thought it would go smoothly. Dr. Raywyn Grant, Fred Campbell, who's a TNF climber, and Kim Bentley, who's a part of the National Brotherhood of Skiers, really talking to us about how did you fall in love with the outdoors? What are some of those adventure gap barriers that James mentioned? And how can we continue to create access, right, for those African Americans and Black people within this who want to explore the outdoors? So we're really excited about that. Our Vans brand is rooted in youth culture and creative expression. And so what they elected to do is they're sponsoring an art contest for K through 12 students with the Orange County Heritage Council on the theme of what does African American excellence look like to you? So that actually starts on February 1st, which is a Saturday. And not only will the winners of that contest get a chance to come on campus and tour the Vans facility, but we'll be hanging their artwork in the Vans headquarters as well. I'm like, the microphone's down here. And lastly, with Dickies, they're really focused on worthy work. And so the National Multicultural Western Heritage Museum and Hall of Fame is actually in Fort Worth, where Dickies is headquartered. So we've invited their executive director to the campus to talk a little bit more about the Buffalo Soldiers and their journey and their contribution to American history as we began to explore the West. And she will also be talking about one of our guiding principles of being curious and how we can continue to get students into the museums. So that's our Black History Month activation. For International Women's Day, we're going to be doing a global webcast featuring several brand athletes under the concept of not just one thing, and really talking about intersectionality of those women, their gender, their sexuality, but then also their experience within their sport and how they've had to compete and overcome different adversity. And last but not least, I wanted to just share a little bit about our action planning process. We're in that process right now. For us, we really consider inclusion diversity a cross collaboration between our business leaders and our HR business partners to ensure that we have equitable career opportunities, to ensure that we're creating a culture of workplace inclusion, and to make sure that we're leading with innovation for the consumer of the future, as several people mentioned. And so for us, we're in the process of collaborating with our talent acquisition partners, our talent development partners, and of course our HR business partners to understand what their brand or corporate functions vision is for fiscal 21, which for us starts in April, and then embedding inclusion and diversity into that. We'll go through the process of presenting that to our business leaders in March, and then we'll put a button on it and present that to our senior leadership. And our leaders are held accountable to what they're able to accomplish. So really just wanted to, again, circle it back to reflection. Kenji started this conversation reflecting on where we were 5 years ago. I think back to my first OR a year ago, and to see faces, familiar faces, and beginning to learn names and recognize people, that's an important feeling, which really is where VF is focused in the future, on that sense of belonging, right? Not just being included, not just being diverse, but how can we make sure that people belong? So again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you all enjoyed this.
That was great. Well done, Joe. Thank you. All right, I know it's running late, and some of you might need to start rolling. But before you go, just a couple comments, and don't forget, as you're leaving, maybe walk with someone you haven't met, or get to know each other, because this community, this rising community and movement in outdoor only gets stronger as you all connect. So to that end, you've seen some amazing things, you've heard some stories from around the industry, but really the question is on you, what next? What can you do? What can I do as an individual? What can I do as my organizational lead or a board member or an employee? So I just want to have you lead with that question, but maybe offer something up from a small business person perspective that I'm going away with. And one idea is to join up with more organizations that are part of this movement. So, Devaki and I started a little page called Everybody Outside. So, to follow that and see what kind of things bubble up from inside and outside the industry. There's Diversify Outdoors. There's the Outdoor CEO Pledge. If you go to Diversify Outdoors or look it up, you will see what that's about, and you'll learn about Teresa Baker a little bit. There are other places where we convene online, and hopefully what we're trying to do with this event and with in between is to find a place to keep the drumbeat going faster, because we're trying to quicken the pace of this movement. And so we're looking for that home. Camber is another place where there's going to be a lot of activity. And I don't want to put Emily on the spot, but we want to be able to post up these concepts for organizations to take on and make their own. So that's one thing, is to join up, be part of the movement in whatever way makes sense for you. And then also calendarize was something I took away from Joe's presentation, was there are touch points, and all of us who run retail stores, have been in the business, we have a calendar, and this is North Base month, or Back to the Trail month, or whatever month it is in your shop or relevant to your business or organization. Calendarize these events. There is International Women's Day. There is Black History Month. We don't have biracial Japaminian month, but maybe we'll get one, and I'll be all over that. But that's another thing to do is put the plan. That's the action plan. These are things any company, any industry, or any organization or individual can do. So I think the feeling of like, we're stuck, or I don't know what to do. I think that there's small steps that in aggregate we can all take to advance this thing. So with that, I leave you to it. Thank you for your patience and letting us go a little long. And I've got all your contact info, so I'll be back in touch with some follow-up about where to go next and where we might start to beat this drum more frequently. So thank you.